Well, just following your argument along, then nobody would ever do anything. I mean, it's a pointless argument. You would only take that line if you really didn't believe in climate change. But my argument is for people who profess to believe in climate change, like the Treasurer. Wouldn't a carbon tax be far more effective than an emissions trading scheme, particularly since 70% of our carbon emissions come essentially from two sources: burning petrol for transportation and our power stations. You've excluded petrol from your emissions trading scheme, and you've given exemptions to all the power stations. So a carbon trading scheme which excludes, or essentially excludes, 70% of the pollution is like having a hamburger trading scheme and excluding McDonald's. Well, it's ridiculous.
Okay. Just before hang on. Before either of you comment on that, I actually would like to hear from Joe Hockey, because you're having your own inquiry into an emissions trading scheme or otherwise, and it does seem you're veering towards a carbon tax, if you believe your spokesman and if you listen very closely to your leader.
Well, Malcolm Turnbull actually gave a very detailed speech around Australia Day this year, outlining a carbon reduction program that he believes, a plan that would be good for Australia. And I think that plan... can we just focus on what's been said in the past 24 hours? No.
Your own spokesman was on the radio this morning talking about a carbon tax.
Well, because we want...
Are you moving towards one?
Well, the target set by the government and the emissions trading scheme laid down by the government is so feeble, and it does have a number of flaws, that now you have to look at alternatives, don't you?
So what's
but
your
we
target?
believe, sorry,
what's
but
your
we believe...
target then?
I'm sorry.
Well,
if I can just finish, please.
What's your target? Very keen to know.
And our very strong view is we were the initiators of an emissions trading scheme. We believe in a market-based approach. And Malcolm Turnbull, as Environment Minister, actually put in the framework for an emissions trading scheme.
Very briefly,
right?
do you think you're moving towards a carbon tax?
Well, no. From our perspective, the bottom line is this. We believe that the world is warming. We believe that mankind has contributed towards that. If a carbon tax or an emissions trading scheme is going to be interchanged, we've got to look at the options. But I'm not going to sit on the program and commit to it, because so far as I'm concerned, so far as Malcolm Turnbull is concerned, we need to do something about the fact that the world is warming.
OK, now I'm going to go to the Treasurer on that question, because it was to you a carbon tax. Is it even under consideration? Was your parliamentary inquiry considering it? Is that why you shut it down?
Not at all. Not at all. The 5% that we've put out there is unconditional. We've said that we will move to 15% if we can achieve agreement across the globe. And that's just common sense. It's very important to get some international support, and that's partly what Kate was referring to before. So we've said 5%, but 15% if we can get that global agreement, which is absolutely essential. But we don't support a carbon tax, because a carbon tax doesn't put any cap on emissions. So we think it's counterproductive. What we think, through our carbon pollution reduction scheme, is we'll get a market-orientated approach, and we'll be able to achieve the results at least cost. That's what we believe. We think that's what the weight of evidence around the world believes. And if you have a carbon tax, you can't link with other schemes around the world either. So linkages internationally, and because it puts a cap on emissions, makes us in a better position to make a good start and to ramp it up if the rest of the world decides to take substantive action.
All right, still on this subject, I'm going to interrupt again, because we actually have a video question that we've been trying to get to. It actually comes from someone who's not in the audience here. It's from Zane Alcorn from Newcastle in New South Wales.
The United Firefighters Union wants emissions cuts of 50% over the next decade, whereas the AWU are opposed to cuts of more than 5%. Shouldn't the union movement be supporting a broad-scale transition to green jobs?
Paul Howes, that's a question for you, obviously, and it implies that you're sceptical of the need for major cuts to emissions.
I was enjoying sitting down here quietly. We've been getting on so well tonight, Wayne. It's good to see representatives of Green Left Weekly. I remember that guy protesting at a thing down in Melbourne before, but
look, still the Firefighters Union, and not the Firefighters Union perhaps have a reason for making that call, and
the Firefighters Union don't represent hundreds of thousands of workers in the steel, aluminium, mining, transportation, manufacturing sectors like I do.
Yeah, but they represent 13,000 people fighting fires.
Well, I also represent several thousand members fighting fires as well. Okay, my members in the DSE, 600 of them were fighting the fires in Victoria.
And,
So
and after that, which the Premier of Victoria ascribes partly or largely to climate change and extreme weather patterns, do you still feel sceptical?
I'm not sceptical about climate change. What I'm sceptical about is the politics of feeling good, of people thinking shutting down a steel plant or an aluminium factory in Australia is going to reduce carbon emissions globally. What I'm scared about is carbon leakage. What we know in Australia is that for every tonne of aluminium made in Australia, compared to every tonne of aluminium made in China, that we have 50% less greenhouse gas emissions with Australian aluminium. We also know that aluminium is a part of the greenhouse gas solution. We know that polyethylene is used to make water tanks, which is a part of the greenhouse gas solution. I mean, the Greens and the environmentals like to cast my members as, you know, polluting vandals for the environment. I mean, these are actually green jobs. When you're talking about green jobs, it's not ecotourism operators down on the river. It's people that are making the materials that will create lightweight cars and lightweight planes. And it's also looking at the fact that carbon leakage is real and has happened in the European Union. The reason why I broadly support the white paper, it's not exactly what I was asking for, and it's not 100% of what I was after, but the reason why I broadly support it is because it will ensure that, yes, we do take action to address the issue, but we also realise the fact that carbon leakage is a real threat, and Australia should be a part of the greenhouse gas solution by producing the materials and having a vibrant manufacturing industry which will save the environment in the long term. And, you know, I mean, I know a lot of people think I'm a sceptic, or, you know, we've got kind of economic Luddites or environmental Luddites, but the reality is we have seen it happen before. I mean, Zane's from Newcastle. I had 15,000 members in Newcastle in the late 1990s, and we saw a steel plant close there. And I know that 60% of my membership that lost their jobs when the Newcastle Steelworks shut have never been re-employed since. And I know that we close the Port Kembla Steelworks in Wollongong, the same thing will be repeated over and over again.
Okay. I want to hear from Christine and then Kate.
And surely in that case the failure is not to have invested in a just transition in the training programs to get people to shift from where they are into the green economy. The CSIRO has just done a major report which shows the hundreds of thousands of jobs. In fact, the big gap there is in getting people across to the green economy, and what we need to do is do a skills audit of the vulnerable industries and then do the training packages to get people across to the new green jobs. But having said that, it's very clear under whether you have whatever mechanism you employ, there will be trade exposed industries and they have to be looked at and dealt with in that context. But the big question here is not so much whether it's a carbon tax or whether it's an emissions trading scheme. The question is, that is a tool, it's a mechanism, what is it there to do? It's to reduce emissions. And unless you have a serious target that is going to get really significant shifts and transformation in the Australian economy, then you're actually locking in a system that'll make it worse. And coming back to Wayne's point about 15%, the rest of the world has said they want on the table as a negotiating range, they want to go between 25 and 40%. So Australia locking in at 15 is actually undermining Copenhagen. So the rest of the world is seriously unimpressed with what Australia is doing, and that's why people are really concerned.
You know what this industry adjustment packages is code for? It's a bunch of politicians flying up to a regional town, writing a few cheques, opening a town hall, and pissing off, and thinking that these workers in these regional centres are going to be okay. Go to Gladstone. What do you do with Gladstone?
It's completely transformational.
How do you make steel? There's only one way to make steel. Extract iron ore, oxygen from iron ore with the addition of carbon. And the reality is, until we have carbon capture and storage or these new projects developed, there is only one way to make steel, and you won't be able to transform that. I mean, how else do you do it? How else do you make steel and make it the same way for 2,000 years?
But the problem we've got is the Australian economy is vulnerable because we've hollowed out, we have completely hollowed out the manufacturing sector, and we are stuck with being Asia's quarry. And we do not want to remain Asia's quarry. We need to diversify the economy and build resilience.
Christine, I need to hear from Kate.
But surely we want an Australian manufacturing food industry. We want to be